I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. We're going to talk about one of the hardest niches to recruit out there, the medical industry, what's working in the medical space, what's not working. But on top of that, we're also going to talk about being able to recruit across different countries, which is, I believe, is something fascinating that I think many of us just haven't even thought about before. So this is going to be an awesome episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have my special guest, Kevin Kirkpatrick, with me to share the secrets of medical recruiting. So welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Thanks, Benjamin. Glad to be here. I've listened to a lot of the episodes, so I'm flattered to be asked to be a guest.
Yeah, awesome. So we always get started. How did you end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
You know what? I went to school for human resources, and then I went back to school for computer systems, and I worked for a call center doing technical support. And I was on the bus. I was on my way to a training session for the company, and I was on the bus, and my boss said, "Did you study human resources?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Do you want to be a recruiter?" I recruiter was, right? So me being 24 and looking to get married and stuff like that, I asked, does it pay well? And she said, "Well, it's a whole $1 an hour more." So I was like, I'm in it. So I'm going from $10 an hour to $11 an hour. I'm great. Let's do this. Right?
That is awesome.
Yeah. My first recruiting job, I hired anywhere between 32 and 64 call center agents a week for $11 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was great. It was an entry level role, so it wasn't like, high level positions, but it was a lot of the same interviews over and over again, every half hour for 10 hours a day, right?
Okay, so go ahead.
There was overtime, so I remember at one point I worked 36 or 40 days straight, and I was loving that extra money, right?
That is awesome. Yeah, I remember back in the day, when you did get the opportunity for overtime and the difference in the pay, that was always phenomenal. So, okay, so you were a call center recruiter.
Yeah.
How did you get into the medical field? What's the in between there?
Yeah. So I went from the call center. I went to a telecommunications, and this is in 1999, right? So I went to a telecommunications company. We did a lot of project management and network architects. So I did that for a few years as an agency. And, I wanted to try corporate, right? Because at that time, corporate recruiters were making really good money in tech because it was a bellwether time. So I was like, I'm going to try this corporate thing. But I lived in Ottawa, Canada, and it's bilingual. So I don't speak French, right? I can order a beer and say inappropriate things, but that's about the extent of it, right? So I'm like, I need to look at somewhere different. So my wife was from a community that was about 3 hours away. So I thought, you know what, that'd be an interesting thing, go live by her family. And so I applied to a hospital recruiting job. Right. And it was interesting because they said, "Oh, you're gonna recruit for nurses, rad techs, finance, and pretty much everything in the hospital." So I'm like, all right, seems cool. So I started there in 2004, and about 2 weeks in, they said, "Oh, by the way, you're also going to start recruiting for physicians." So I was like, all right, I guess we're learning on the fly here, right? So I spent 4 years doing that, where I recruited pretty much everything, everything from chief executives right down to, or not down to, but to floor cleaners and everything else along the way. In 2008, I decided I had no room for growth. I'm not an HR person, love HR people, but that's just not me. I'm a recruiting geek, and I'm interested in recruiting only, really. So I then started my own agency in 2008, and I was blessed. I fell into it backwards, where the hospital was didn't want me to leave. So they said, well, can we contract a portion of your time? I'm like, sure, right? I'll give you 3 days a week for, I think it was like $7,000 a month. And I did that for 4 years. Meanwhile, growing my other clients outside of that. And the only thing was everything I did outside was tech because I didn't want to muddy my brand by doing healthcare. But I ended that contract in 2012, and then I went all in on physicians and healthcare.
That is okay, real quick, pause there. So like you and I think this is like a good structure, and I don't believe this is going to happen everywhere or everybody's going to have this opportunity, but I think it just showed the quality of the work that you did before you made the jump, that where you were working at for multiple years, they wanted to be your first client.
Yeah. Yeah. And you laugh, but they were a client of mine last year. Right. So it was interesting because, I enjoyed the understanding the client structure and being somewhat in-house. So it's kind of why I like to do the executive and physician searches, because I feel like I get more information and it's almost like I'm part of the team, right? So from that aspect of it, I enjoy the engagement that way. And to this point, almost 90% of my business is referrals. I am the worst business development person ever. So if anybody's looking for advice, don't call, right? I was joking, I was bugging Rich Rosen this week, right? Because I'm like, I need some business development advice, right? It's literally been, I recruited a physician here, so they told somebody else when they were reminiscing about how hard it was, and next thing you know, I'm getting phone calls.
Well, and okay, so I don't take this the wrong way. I suck at BD too. Like I've reached out to other people to kind of help me with the BD side of the house. So pure transparency to the listeners. But you're doing something that I believe most recruiters have kind of skipped, or they haven't done it. Like, you've built a brand within this space, but you've also mastered relationships. Was there something and we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit. When you were working as the in-house recruiter, they loved you so much, they wanted to give you a contract. How many other recruiters were in that office or part of that system?
So I was lucky. There was like 2 of us, 3 of us, right? So it was, they were like, oh my, all of this knowledge is going to walk out the door, right? So there was a bit of, some cards in my hand because of that.
I mean, they could have easily just gone and put a job up and got another recruiter. Right? You did something different with relationships. How did you work those relationships to make them that they're still a client? This is back in 2008. We're back in we're now in 2024. They're still a client. Like, what did you do on the relationship side of the house for that?
I like to over communicate, right? And what I love is strategy, right? Like I just did a couple projects developing strategy, recruitment strategies for different healthcare organizations. And I just like, trying to figure out how we can make them better. Right. And so it's not strictly about making a placement. It's about how can I leave the organization better than I started. Right. And that could be mentoring their recruiters. It could be, helping them look at their compensation structure, right? It's like, how do you leave value? Because value and impact create brand, which creates that attractiveness, right? Like, I think that it's about, about doing that. And, I'm not an expert at it because I still have to put a note in my calendar for every Friday morning to email all my clients, right? And some of them I may not get them every week, right? But I try and make sure that I'm emailing updates on a regular basis because it's most of it is retained search. You want them to know where their money's gone, right? And you want, and because healthcare recruiting is never fast enough because some of my searches take 12 months, right? Because I've had to relocate a physician from the UK to a part of Canada, or, I've had to wait for them to finish a fellowship or finish a residency. So it takes longer. So the problem is if you can't meet the expectations around timeline, you have to communicate what's being done on their behalf, right? It's give them the light at the end of the tunnel so that they can wait because they know what they're waiting for. Whereas if you don't tell them what they're waiting for, they just think they're waiting and they'll assume the worst, that you're off playing golf or something else, right?
Okay. What I have heard for, industry wide and like trainings and stuff like that, that so many recruiters, they get the signed contract and then they never actually have a conversation ever again.
Yeah. So I have an intake template. So my normal process is I will, you have the initial sales call, you agree you're gonna work together. Then once the contract's signed, then I do an intake, right? And that's a meeting where I think it's about 12 questions.
Okay.
Because with physicians, they're so busy, and I'm sure this is true in tech too, right? The person's so busy that if you can't hook them and engage them with enough information at the start, you're not going to engage them at all. They're just going to move on to the next thing. So I have always, and this is that internal recruiter piece of me too, right? Is I want to know enough that they think I work directly for that hospital, right? So then I can give them enough, I can answer their first 5 questions so that they decide that, yeah, I want to progress through this process, or no, I'm not. But if I've done enough, then hopefully they tell their friend about me, or they give me their friend's name, and I go, right? Because I want every call to either be a candidate or a referral.
Okay. So you also have a game plan for almost every single call. You're trying to get something out of it.
Yeah.
Like, or subconsciously, or give.
Give or like impart value or retrieve value.
Okay. Do you think that you are better with these long-term relationships because you are an internal recruiter? Because I know, like, when it comes down to, like, growing up in an agency, it is, many places it's turn and burn. And I think that turn and burn has really hurt the longevity in our industry. But you going internal for a little while, did that help develop that relational structure?
I think so. I think a bit. I've also gone internal a couple other times over the last 16 years, right? I went to work for 2 other hospitals, mostly because of project-based stuff. Like one hospital wanted somebody to audit their processes and stuff. So I went in, put service level agreements in place, looked at their tech stack, did some recruiter mentoring, and then after a year, it was where it needed to be, and I left and went back to doing my own thing full time. And then I went through a personal situation a couple of years, probably five years ago now. So just for stability, I went in-house for a couple of years. Right?
Okay.
So it was just a case of needing some stability while I went through a divorce. So I do think that helps. I do think the fact that the searches take longer, makes it so you have to communicate more. But I was lucky because when I got into recruiting, I never went into a churn and burn environment. The first place I went to, we charged $1,000 to $1,500 a day per consultant, right? So,
okay,
you weren't looking at high volume. So I did go to a search firm at one point years and years ago called Quantum, and it was quantum management recruiters, and it was like the turn, and I lasted 4 months, right? I made one placement in 4 months. They found out I was looking for another job and let me go, right? So I spent the summer playing golf. It was the best year of my life.
Well, I want to jump over like a little more on medical recruiting. So when it comes to tech and when it comes to most other places, like everybody lives on LinkedIn. Like there's a LinkedIn profile for everybody. But when it comes to the medical space, what is it? Something like maybe only 50% of the people in the medical career live on LinkedIn. So how do you even find these people?
Yeah. So the beauty of it is and it's funny because this differs from country to country, right?
Okay.
Years ago, I started doing work in the U.S. as well. And part of the reason was because there's more tools, right? There's companies like Practice Match, Profiles LLC that sell you screen lists of residents. right? Then you've got Heartbeat.ai, Doximity, that both are like LinkedIn for healthcare. And then every state's got a list of their practitioners that usually has contact info, or you can cross-reference it with social media. So, so the US is a lot easier that way. I've also, last September, I finally decided to grow some confidence and start posting more online and doing LinkedIn lives and doing and starting a podcast and stuff like that to try and attract more people to reach out to me, because it was, it's harder and harder to find the names. But the biggest thing is you got to build relationship collateral to get referrals, right? Because that's how you find the people that aren't on LinkedIn, or they've got a LinkedIn profile from when they graduated from medical school 20 years ago. So it really comes down to pushing those referrals, right? And that's why when I coached anybody or talked to anybody, I say, every conversation has to be either a candidate or a lead on another, because there's only so many physicians, and I can't say, I'm going to put you in a boot camp and teach you, 5 programming languages, and then you'll learn on the job. Like we don't have that luxury, right? And then, in Canada, we can recruit from the UK and Ireland and stuff like that. But in the US, you're confined to within the US, because even Canada to the US is a challenge, because there's exams that have to be done in order to get an H-1B license, right? So I've actually had an easier time recruiting Americans to come to Canada than Canadians to go to the US. So it's, it's crazy.
Now, you said, what was it? Relationship capital was what the word you used?
You got to build relationship capital, right? Like deposit capital in someone else's bank so that they then have a reason to help you, right? It takes a long time. It's not something you can rush. And as someone who's got, adult ADHD, it's something I'm constantly having to remind myself, right? And I had this conversation 2 weeks ago where, someone referred somebody to me and I emailed them right away. And the person that referred them said, Kev, you need to slow down. Right? Like, you're worth being referred to. So, let them investigate you and let them come to you. And I was like, okay, there's something to be said for that. Right. So it's, it's really, being patient and stuff like that. And I bounced from doing nursing to not doing nursing, to doing physicians, to doing executives, to not doing physicians. And each time I make a change like that, you have to rebuild that capital, right? Because, people don't know what you're doing and stuff. So sometimes that's the value of a niche and staying in a niche for an extended period of time. I've befuddled my way to being in healthcare for 20 years. So it's, that saved my bacon.
Well, and one more question on these relationships and the capital that you've built. For somebody that has ADHD, so you're always like squirrel. Do you have a system in place that helps you keep up with these relationships?
Yeah. So I think the beauty of posting more content on LinkedIn has allowed me a group of people that are constantly commenting on my posts and interacting with my posts. So I feel that's helping me build a little community. But then, like, every Friday morning, I have a note in my calendar to email all of my clients, right? So I open up my Crelate and I go one by one and email them all an update. Some of them I might have talked to 2 days earlier, but it's my way of knowing that at least once a week you're going to hear from me, right? And then I pester my clients to give me their cell phone numbers. So I will text, right? Because on a Wednesday sitting on the couch, I might have a brain thought and say, oh, what about this? And then text that client. So I like to communicate a lot. So I think that's my key. And it's, use your ATS. I need to get better at using mine, and then, put calendar reminders and just figure out what's going to work for you to ensure that you have that regular touch points, right?
Okay, awesome. And you've been, a solo or small team most of this time. What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome to keep on seeing the success as like a solo biller right now?
Yeah, so I think staying consistent with where you are through good times and bad times, I think is a good tactic. So my Canadian business has been pretty stable right from the get go, but my U.S. business has gone up and down as the economy's gone up and down. So I think consistency is there. Figuring out how to get the most out of yourself before you start looking at other people, and I think is key, right? Last year, I made a lot of mistakes actually because I hired people to work for me, and I probably wasted it's probably not a waste to them, but to me, I probably spent about $90,000 on people last year that didn't generate any placements, right? So
that's a lesson learned.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? But part of it was I tried international sourcers, and they generated volumes of work, but it wasn't the right work, right? So
Okay.
they were good at finding nurses or respiratory therapy techs, but the physician and executive stuff that really was my passion, they didn't that. So I was trying to boil the ocean a little bit. And because of that came extra cost, became inefficiencies, because I was running around, right? Like they'd be setting up meetings in my calendar with a physician that I couldn't place because they couldn't get a license or they couldn't get through immigration. And then I have to be mindful of the fact that they've set up an interview with somebody. So then I have to have a conversation with that person and basically, tell them, sorry, we wasted your time, right? So, I really think I have my niece that works for me. She's a university student. She works 20 hours a week for me, and it's been the best, right? Because she's like an extension of me. So she does work that feeds into me, right?
Okay.
And then I hired a gentleman who works for me in the U.S. That is slowly coming on. And the problem with physician stuff is it takes 6 to 12 months to start seeing revenue. So you've got to be patient. And for me, that's really hard because you're still paying expenses every month with nothing coming in. So honestly think it comes down to leveraging your time as well as you can and focusing on understanding that your systems will determine how you use your time and get the most out of it, right?
Yeah, you mentioned one thing a second ago. You have your Canadian business, and then you have your U.S. business. What's it like having technically multiple businesses in multiple countries?
It's kind of cool, actually. The reason is that there's so many similarities, and this is more Canada, U.S. There's so many cool similarities between the two countries that it's like working with those cool cousins that you know, right? Like it's not like if I was trying to do work in Singapore or something like that, or the Middle East, it would be where there's vast cultural differences. It would probably be much harder. And there's been such a long-standing history in healthcare of people going between the two countries, right? Like the U.S. has been hiring travel nurses from Canada for 30 years. So it's really like, it's like that cool cousin, right? They might sound a little bit different than you, but listen there. And then the other thing too is I think the healthcare systems are so drastically different that you just have to be mindful of the nuances and understand that each jurisdiction has different rules and different opportunities, right? So, it's good, and gives me an excuse to visit the U.S. On a regular basis, right? I like Hilton Head in South Carolina a lot, so and Florida and Texas. So, it gives me an excuse to go down there and expense golf trips, right?
Well, this is going to sound like a completely stupid question because I'm completely naive to having a business in another country. Like, can you expense one of the tools that you're using in the U.S. for your Canadian business also?
So the U.S. businesses pay my Canadian business. So technically, I only have one physical business,
Okay.
right? So I invoice them and they pay me, and there's a form that I have to fill out, a W-9. It's been a while
Okay.
because it's mostly repeat clients. So there's that. What is nice is that all of the tools, I don't know who in the recruitment industry decided this, but every tool I use, they charge me American dollars, right? Like Sourcewell charges me in American dollars. I live in Canada, right? So what else?
They're a UK company too.
Yeah. So same thing. Like everybody charges in American dollars. So they'll be like, oh, it's $99 a month. No, it's not. It's like 130, right? Because I have to do the exchange rate. So now, in defense of that, when I make a placement in the U.S., I get 30% more when it's converted into Canadian dollars, right? So my bank has I have an American account. The money goes in there, and then I can move it at whatever the day's exchange rate is into my Canadian, right?
Okay.
At some point, I will knock on wood, will open up an actual corporate entity in the United States, owned by the Canadian entity, and then look at that. So because it'll be easier, because right now I have to use a third party to pay out commissions and stuff in the U.S. Instead of doing it directly, right? So you lose money that way, but the filing costs and the IRS scares me. So
the IRS scares all of us Americans, so don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. See, Revenue Canada scares me too, but not as much as the IRS. So, but I can just get an American accountant, and that might help that, right?
Cool. Yeah. I was just pure curiosity, because we've looked at opening up like some bank accounts in other countries, and they're like, oh, American. Oh, wait, too much work for us. We don't want to touch you.
Yeah. It's interesting. And a friend of mine who's got like outside of the U.S. but works in the U.S. They've had challenges with clients where they're like, we want to deposit into a U.S. company, a U.S. bank account, and not like a Wise account or whatever, right? So, you just talk to your accountant. The two countries are so intertwined in business, right?
Yeah.
We're each other's largest trade partners. So, there's ways to do it. It just means, talking to your accountant ahead of time. And I've seen a ton of American firms do placements in Canada as well, right? So, there's that. And to be honest with you, as someone with ADHD, I like going between different systems because it's not the same thing over and over again, right? Like dealing with a for-profit hospital is so much better than my provincially funded hospital. So, like there's different aspects of it, right? So it's kind of.
Now, you also mentioned LinkedIn Lives, and you've been telling me about this, like, before the podcast. It seems like LinkedIn's really pushing lives. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I use StreamYard, which is a great tool. I really like it because it's nice and easy to use. And it basically pushes your content to multiple places. So my LinkedIn Lives go to LinkedIn, they go to YouTube, YouTube Lives, and they go to Twitter, I believe, and Facebook.
Okay.
It was, I started off trying to do blog posts and have a list of subscribers and stuff like that, but I'm a terrible writer. So I'm like, you know what? Let's make my life simpler, and I'll just record myself talking to somebody, right? And I found that the ability to have a conversation with somebody shows your knowledge better than any sort of written post at all, right? It goes back and forth. You can expand on things easily. You can leverage the other person's response and engage kind of, what you're saying. So I found that almost every LinkedIn Live I've done has resulted in either a client lead or a candidate lead, right? So they've all...
That's powerful.
Well, and it's interesting because I was talking to someone and I said, like, it's not about likes, it's about engagement, right? If I get 0 likes, but someone emails me and says, hey, you sounded like an idiot, I'll take that, right? because it's a conversation. It's beyond just someone's clicked the like button and moved on with their day, right? So, I mean, that's the key for me is it's like, I want to say something that people either ask more questions about or they tell me I'm wrong. That's cool too, because I've been wrong a million times in my life. So, it's just that. And I do find the engagement, is better, with those than it is with my posts itself. And it's
So I love that you've been going live, and almost every single time that you go live, it has turned into either a new conversation for a new client or a new conversation for a new candidate. And that's just, I think that's so powerful. And like, it's also something that not very many people are doing. And because of you, I've actually started replaying the podcast episodes, like restreaming it live on LinkedIn. And it's like the past 5 episodes is like 4,000 minutes of watch time.
Yeah. Oh, well, if you think about it, like you're sitting on most of us have LinkedIn open on one screen or another, right? And it's so easy to click the play button and listen to it while you're doing something else, right? Like I have behind my monitors, I have a big 52-inch screen, and I will normally play I play a lot of your podcasts on the screen while I'm doing work. Right.
Thank you.
Because the notion of sitting for 30 minutes and looking strictly at a podcast, my brain doesn't work that way, but I can listen to it while I'm creating call lists or while I'm creating ads or in Canva or whatever. Right. So it's easier that way. And people, what I've learned is that people want to do business with people they know or feel like they know, and they want to build trust. And often that comes from listening to somebody talk and answer questions, right? So I think that's where the videos really come in quite easily. And then I use Vidyard to do the odd little, where they have your picture in the bottom corner in front of your screen. Like I'll log in, I'll look at my profile and then do a little update video and stuff like that, right? So I'm trying to be more out and about and share my expertise, and it's worked out. Like, for the first time ever, I have hospitals calling me and saying, "Can you help us look at our process and make changes?" Right. So I've kind of gone into advisory work beyond just the executive search. Right. So, which then is fun for me because I'm a geek and I like that. Right. So, going to an organization and figuring out how they can do their work themselves, is rewarding, right?
Oh, and I believe the modern day recruiter isn't just a placement machine anymore. Modern day recruiter is a true consultant.
Yeah, like if I look at last year's billings, probably 25% came from consulting, and the other 75% was placements, right? So
that's awesome.
But for me, it's a sanity thing. It's not even a monetary thing, because I'd be willing to bet if I took that time and focused on just making placements, I probably would have made more money. However, my soul and the recharging of my batteries and stuff like that, because that's the hard part is recruiting takes so much. You take so many hits, and it's so much negativity that I do those things because it fills my battery up again, right?
Perfect. Well, before we move on to the next part of the podcast, is there anything else that you would love to share about recruiting in the medical industry?
You know what? It even with physicians and everything else, it's really executive search, based on the amount of time and energy you need to have to understand the role, because they're pretty concerning, right? So, having a lot of time with the client at the start of the search is definitely there, and it might be that way in tech too. But I haven't been in tech recruiting for too long, so I don't. Okay. I can't speak to that at all.
Awesome. We're going to jump over to the quick fire questions.
Nice.
I know you're kind of like training a new recruiter, so this is definitely extremely relevant. But what advice would you give to a brand new recruiter that's just getting started in the industry this year?
Go somewhere that's going to provide you with structure and provide you with the ability to understand and learn what things are going to be successful, and how to do more and more of that, right? And It could be going to a big firm that's systemized and starting out there, or it's, finding a mentor and stuff like that, right? Like I've been recruiting since 1999, and I would still consider myself an intermediate because, there's so much that I don't know, and I'm constantly asking questions and constantly trying new things, right? Some good, some bad, but I mean, it's a case of, you know, uh, always learn how the people you chasing, how they communicate and where they communicate, and be mindful of how you're going to get the most out of your time, and B, secondly, how you're going to survive the negative aspects of this job so that you can continue to do it for an extended period of time.
I love that. Same question, but for people that have been around the block, like what advice would you give to them for the recruiters that have been in the game for a while?
You know what, and this is something I've learned. So for the longest time, I was naive, and I thought that I shouldn't talk to other recruiters because they're my competition, right? And I did connect with recruiters. I didn't listen to what other people were doing. I just, I used to always joke that I'm like, I'm just going to live in the back cave, and if you need to know me, you're going to know me, type of thing, right? That is the most naive, ridiculous thought process ever, right? And I wish someone had to kick me in the head 10 years ago. Talk to other recruiters, leverage other people, and then be thankful for that, right? Like just network and understand that, what is that saying that high tides rise all boats, right? So I think that's a key is to focus on continually evolving, improving, and commiserating with your peers.
Great advice. I mean, Facebook groups is what really started it for me, just like opening my eyes to what's out there and what other people are doing. And that's had a huge impact on like our bottom line and just, the conversations I have on the podcast. I'm like, dang, that's a great idea. I never even thought about that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because that's what I've enjoyed a lot about your podcast too, right? Is you've had people that I know, like I'm either connected to them on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you know them, but you don't know their story, right? So then you're like, you get to listen to them and listen to their stories. And, when you have a good day, you've got someone to celebrate with. And when you have a bad day, you have someone that says, oh yeah, that happened to me last week, right? And then this week, here I am, moving forward, right? So I definitely think that, having unofficial colleagues is a great way to go.
Is there a book that has had a huge impact on your career?
So, it's funny, like I read so much during the day online and journals and stuff like that, when I read a book, it's usually like a spy novel that I want, right? I did read Mitch Albom's Tuesdays with Maury, and it had more of a spiritual effect on me than anything else. And that's kind of, I think that happened around the same time I decided to start working for myself, right? Was, getting that notion of, take control of your time, take control of your life and enjoy it, right? Because we don't know how long it's going to happen.
What kind of helped you make that jump?
Yep.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite rec tech tool that you love at the moment?
This is a tough one. I've been using Sourcewell a lot for the last couple of years, and I've just decided to use Crelate instead of paying for Crelate and paying for Sourcewell for message sequencing. So that's kind of been something I've played a lot with. I love Sourcewell. I think it's a great tool. Physicians never respond to the first email, so you need to email them 3 to 5 times in order to get a response. So it's a necessity. Sociamonial. I don't even know how to say it. Sociamonial is something I picked up on AppSumo because of DSP, I think, and I love it. Like I've been using it to manage all my posts. It has an AI function that it builds your persona, and then you can click on this AI function that gives you prompts to then use in ChatGPT to do stuff. So I've been using it for proposals. as well as blog posts and everything else. That's been really, really good. And I started playing with Outplay because of Rich Rosen. So we'll see. And it looks pretty cool. So I have training on Tuesday.
Nice.
When this probably when this gets posted, but those are kind of the ones I'm playing the most right now.
Okay. What do you think has been a huge part of your own personal success?
You know what? I'm a simple human being, right? Like I enjoy talking to people. I have curiosity about what people do, right? I'm the annoying guy in the elevator that asks you what you do for a living just because I'm interested, right? So curiosity, I think, is the biggest thing, right? And then I have to balance my excitement and curiosity, right? Like I get a search, I get excited, I want to jump in it right away. Sometimes I need to, use that curiosity to ask more and talk about it more before jumping right in. But curiosity is the big thing, and finding, like, I love recruiting physicians and I love recruiting executives because I believe they're both impact roles, right? And there's a community in Ontario where I live where I help them recruit 2 family physicians, right? So what's going to happen is when each of those family physicians rosters patients, probably 3,000 to 4,000 people are going to have a family physician because of the recruiting I did. So 3,000 people will have a doctor to take care of them because of the work I did. So, that's pretty cool, right? And I think that's the, finding an attachment to the work you do and the curiosity.
I think that's powerful. It's always the best recruiters have a way and a purpose with what they do. And they look at it that way. Like, there are going to be 3,000 families that don't have a physician if it isn't for the work that I'm doing as a recruiter. It's the bigger picture look at is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kevin, when it comes down to you personally, and you've seen a lot in the recruiting game, you got a chance to ever sit down with yourself, like back in the day, like you're pretending you're sitting down with yourself for a cup of coffee. It's your first few weeks in recruiting. What would you tell yourself for advice?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's some days where I tell myself to get a real job. There's other days I think where it would be study the game more, right? Like study the craft and focus on continual improvement, right? I think I got to the point where I thought I knew what I was doing too early and stopped learning, right? So I think I would have said to myself, like, just, keep investing your time and energy into learning your craft. Because like I remember being able to, years ago, making enough placements one month to paying off my wife's student loans in a single check. Right. So imagine taking someone from, I think she had 7 years left of payments, and this job allowed me to pay that off. Right. I bought my father a car for cash. So, I think there's so much cool stuff that happens from this being in this job, in this lifestyle. I think that's just keep studying your craft, find the good people, and then be exposed to the good people as much as possible, right? And that's where the Facebook groups with the DSPs and the Neil Lovitz and Rich Rosen, who's probably one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And then yourself. And I think it's just surrounding yourself with those people that are continually wanting to improve and go from there. Because even at 25 years in May, I still find there's tons of things to do, right? I bought David Perry's executive search for executive search guide today, right? So, I'm gonna read it because I just saw it. And then I have Steve Finkel was on the Recruiters and Boxing Short podcast, so I bought his book, right? So just invest in yourself.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners before I let you go?
You know what? I think find people to celebrate your successes with. At one point last year, I was like, this is terrible. I'm gonna go Uber Eats or something. And then I go and meet with my accountant, find out I made a lot of money last year, and realize that, hey, hang on a second. Why am I lamenting about how bad this is when I made all kinds of money, right? Now the problem is I also got a tax bill for $120,000, right? Thank you, Canadian government. But it is what it is.
Awesome. And for the listeners, if they want to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
You know what? Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on X at capital Kevin K _Kirkpatrick there, but LinkedIn's the best. You can find me on from email there, and if you want to tell me my posts are idiotic, please do, because I love that. And let's just share advice. I love sharing advice, right? Like, it's my favorite thing to do. Mentoring and sharing advice is how we all grow.
It's awesome. Well, Kevin, I just want to say thank you much for coming on, talking about the ins and outs of the medical field. If you're listening, I would highly, highly recommend following Kevin and seeing what he's doing with these LinkedIn Lives. Like, follow him, check a few of them out, because how awesome would it be for every time you go live on LinkedIn, you picked up a new candidate or a new client? It's the power of branding, and Kevin's really been working on figuring that out. So Kevin, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. For the listeners, make 2024 your absolute best year yet. Let's go, guys.
All right.